Imagine waking up one morning to the sound of horses outside your door. You know what it means. Every parent in every Christian village from Serbia to Greece knows what it means. The Ottoman collectors have come. And before nightfall, one of your children will be gone forever. It is the 15th century. The Ottoman Empire stretches from the gates of Vienna to the deserts of Arabia, the most powerful military machine on earth, built on conquered lands and conquered people. But the Ottomans had a problem that no empire before them had solved. How do you build an army that is absolutely loyal, not to a tribe, not to a family, not to a religion, but to the Sultan alone? The answer they found was so brutal, so psychologically precise, that historians still struggle to find the right word for it. They called it the Devshirme, the blood tax. Every few years, Ottoman officials would ride into Christian villages across the Balkans and Anatolia. They would line up the boys. They would examine them like livestock, their teeth, their height, their eyes, their strength. And then they would take the best ones. Not for a year, not for a decade, forever.
The most terrifying thing about the Devshirme was not that it was chaotic or cruel in the way that war is cruel. It was that it was organized, systematic, bureaucratic. There were forms to fill out. There were quotas. There were officials with clipboards who rode from village to village, checking boxes as they destroyed families. The system was precise. Ottoman officials, called Devshirmesi, would arrive in a Christian village with imperial orders. Every household with multiple sons was required to present their boys between the ages of 8 and 18. The officials would inspect each child. They were looking for specific qualities: physical strength, intelligence, good teeth, clear eyes, no physical defects. The brightest and strongest were taken. The weak and the sick were left behind, not out of mercy, but because they were not useful. Once selected, the boys were registered in imperial ledgers. Their names were written down, their Christian names, their village, their father's name. It was the last time those names would ever be officially recorded. From that moment, they ceased to exist as who they were. They were converted to Islam, given new names, enrolled in Ottoman training schools. And the process of erasing everything they had been, every memory, every language, every family bond, began immediately and systematically. The empire did not want soldiers. It wanted instruments. No historical account captures what happened in those villages when the Ottoman collectors arrived better than the silence that followed their departure. Witnesses described it the same way, century after century, village after village. The horses rode away. And then, nothing. Just the sound of mothers. The day the Devshirmesi came to a village was remembered for generations. Fathers who tried to hide their sons were beaten. In some cases, killed. The law was absolute. Resistance was treason against the Sultan. The boys who were selected were given 1 hour to say goodbye. 1 hour. Mothers pressed food into their sons' hands that they would never eat. Fathers gripped their boys' shoulders and could not find words for what they needed to say. Priests moved through the crowd making the sign of the cross over children who would never again enter a Christian church. Some boys were as young as 8 years old. The selected children were roped together, not cruelly, not with the deliberate brutality of slave traders, but with the casual efficiency of men doing a job they had done many times before. They were led away down the road. Most of them never looked back. Not because they didn't want to, but because the Ottoman officials had learned, through generations of experience, that looking back made the separation harder for everyone. The boys were kept moving, always moving, until home was so far behind them that it existed only as a feeling they could no longer name. What the Ottomans did to those boys in the years that followed was not torture. It was something more sophisticated and more permanent than torture. Torture breaks the body. What the Devshirme system did broke the self, and then rebuilt it into something entirely new. Something that belonged entirely to the Sultan. The boys were taken to training schools called Asami Oğlan, schools for raw recruits. There, the systematic destruction of their former identities began. Their Christian names were replaced with Turkish names. Their native languages were forbidden. Boys caught speaking Serbian or Greek or Albanian were punished. Their clothing was replaced with Ottoman dress. Their heads were shaved. Every marker of who they had been was methodically removed. In its place, a new identity was constructed. They learned Ottoman Turkish. They learned the Quran. They learned military discipline, horsemanship, archery, swordsmanship. They were taught that their only loyalty was to Allah and to the Sultan, in that order. The training lasted years, sometimes a decade. And it worked. Not because the boys were weak, but because children are extraordinarily adaptable, and because the system was designed by people who understood, with clinical precision, exactly how much pressure was required to reshape a human being from the inside out. By the time training was complete, most of them had forgotten the sound of their mother's voice. The boys taken by the Devshirme did not become ordinary soldiers. They became the Janissaries, the most feared military force in Europe for 200 years. An army of men with no homeland, no family, no loyalty except to the Sultan. And that made them the most dangerous soldiers who ever lived. The Janissaries were unlike anything Europe had ever faced. They did not fight for land they could return to. They did not fight for families waiting at home. They had no home. They had no families. They had been taken from those things so long ago that the absence no longer felt like loss, it felt like identity. They were trained from childhood to do one thing with absolute perfection: kill for the Ottoman Empire. At the Battle of Kosovo in 1389, Janissary forces helped shatter the Serbian medieval state. At the fall of Constantinople in 1453, it was Janissary infantry that breached the walls that had held for 1,000 years. At the gates of Vienna in 1529, European armies trembled at the sight of their approach. These were the children of Serbian farmers, Greek fishermen, Bulgarian peasants, taken as boys, returned as conquerors, to the very lands they had been stolen from. Here is the detail about the Devshirme that no one tells you. The boys who were taken, the ones who survived the training, who rose through the ranks, who became generals and administrators and grand viziers, some of them became the most powerful men in the Ottoman Empire. More powerful than the Sultan's own sons. And a few of them never forgot where they came from. The Devshirme system contained within it a strange and brutal irony. Because the boys were cut off from all family connections, they were considered more trustworthy than the Sultan's own relatives, who had their own ambitions and their own dynasties to protect. A man with no family cannot be bribed through his family. A man with no homeland cannot be turned against the empire through loyalty to another state. This made Devshirme graduates uniquely valuable. Many rose to become pasha, provincial governors commanding armies and tax revenues that dwarfed the wealth of European kings. Some became Grand Vizier, the second most powerful position in the empire, effectively running the Ottoman state, while the Sultan focused on ceremony. Ibrahim Pasha, Sokala Mem Pasha, born a Serbian boy named Bajika Sokolovic, taken by the Devshirme, risen to command the entire Ottoman Empire for 15 years. A Serbian child, running the empire that had stolen him. History has never produced a more precise definition of the word complicated. Most of the boys taken by the Devshirme disappeared completely into the Ottoman system. Their families never heard from them again. But there are documented cases, rare, precious, heartbreaking cases, of men who rose to power within the empire and used that power to secretly protect the villages they had been stolen from. Men who never forgot. Even when forgetting would have been safer. Sokala Mem Pasha, the Serbian boy who became Grand Vizier, is the most documented case. In the decades he controlled the Ottoman Empire, he used his position to protect Serbian Orthodox institutions. He arranged for the restoration of the Serbian Patriarchate, the head of the Serbian Orthodox Church, and appointed his own brother as Patriarch. A Muslim Grand Vizier of the Ottoman Empire, secretly maintaining the Christian religious institutions of his birth people. He never converted back. He never returned to Serbia. He never publicly acknowledged what he was doing or why. But the Serbian Orthodox Church survived the Ottoman period largely intact. And historians who have studied Sokala Mem Pasha believe that survival was not accidental. He remembered. In the only way available to him. In silence, and in power, and across a distance of decades, he remembered the village they had taken him from. And he made sure it was still standing when he died. The Devshirme ended in the 17th century, when the Ottoman Empire began to decline and the Janissaries became too powerful to control. But the children it took, hundreds of thousands of them across 3 centuries, those children never came home. Their names are in Ottoman archives. Their Christian names, their villages, their fathers' names. Written down by the officials who took them. Preserved in the records of the empire that erased them. The blood tax lasted nearly 300 years. In that time, it took boys from every Christian village in the Balkans, Serbian, Greek, Albanian, Bulgarian, Bosnian, Macedonian. It built the army that conquered Constantinople. It built the administrative class that ran the most powerful empire on earth. And it left behind, in every village it touched, a particular kind of silence. The silence of families that waited for sons who never returned. Of mothers who kept a corner of the house the way their boy had left it. Of fathers who watched the road for decades. The boys who were taken did not die. Most of them lived long lives, in power and in discipline and in the absolute loyalty they had been trained to feel. But the children who had been taken, the 8-year-old Serbian boy, the 10-year-old Greek fisherman's son, those children died the day the Ottoman officials led them down the road. They just didn't know it yet.